for a while were generally popular, except that when people bought the policies, they were often told your premiums won't go up, generally speaking. But that ended up not really being the case, and that the vast majority of people ended up having to pay more. The promised benefits didn't keep up with the cost of long-term care. And it's gone from something like 125 insurance companies offering it down to about 15 because it's such a tricky business. So what's your take on whether long-term care insurance is a good way to manage these potential costs?
So currently there's about 7.5 million people that actually have a private long-term care insurance policy. When you kind of think about the overall cost for long-term care, what we know is that the vast majority of people are getting their care from their families. And family caregivers contribute roughly about $470 billion in unpaid care every year. Private long-term care insurance is an option for those who could potentially afford it. It is a niche product in the sense that, as I mentioned before, 7.5 million people have these options. What we're seeing in terms of the private long-term care insurance industry is that it's going through a transformation for many of the things that you just mentioned, Robert, that there was an assumption that there might be more in terms of lapse rates, and that the interest rates would actually be viable so that the carriers could actually make some money, if you will, in order to be able to pay out claims. And what we've known over the last couple of years is the fact that, you know, given the Great Recession and the drastic rates in terms of decline in interest rates, and coupled with the fact that people, which is a good thing, when they buy a long-term care insurance policy, they hold on to it.
Right.
Right. So there were some assumptions that were made with that product that didn't bear out, as you indicated before.
There was one stat from an AARP report that I'd never seen, but it was basically for every 1 percentage point drop in interest rates, the cost of providing the policy to the insurer goes up 10 to 15%. Because when the insurer takes that money in, they invest it.
That's exactly right.
They're investing the float, but they have to play it safe.
That's exactly
and
right.
when interest rates are so low, they're just not making much money, and that's been a big problem for the insurance industry.
And then the other thing too is the fact that there's some challenges both on the supply and demand side. Right. So as you indicated, in terms of for insurers, that's been a challenge. But also, if you think about it from a consumer standpoint, you're asking me to purchase a product that I may or may not necessarily need 30, 40 years down the line. And the other aspect of that, too, is the fact that there's different variations and complexity. So and then you tack on top of that the increases in premiums. So I think that the industry itself has done a deep look to try to get a sense as to exactly how can we be more responsive to the needs of consumers, how can we reduce some of the complexity in terms of some of the products, while actually meeting a actual need. And what we're seeing is the fact that while standalone policies have gone down, you are seeing an increase in hybrid products. So you are seeing that increase in terms of what consumers are looking for, both in terms of to address some of this more long-term predictions in terms of what the need might be and also what the benefits might actually happen.
Right. And by a hybrid product, you mean basically it's life insurance with a long-term care rider.
Right.
So basically, it's life. If for some reason you need it, it's an acceleration of the death benefit. At least that's one variation.
That's one variation, exactly.
Right.
And the other thing I would say is the fact that we actually just released a report on the state of private long-term care insurance, and I would encourage people who are thinking about that as a product is to try to get it when you're younger and also when you're healthy, in part because of the underwriting requirements. And the way that private long-term care insurance work is the fact that the younger you purchase the product, the cheaper the premium will actually be. And that's something to also consider, and also kind of think about some of the trade-offs. The private long-term care insurance market itself is looking at different variations of how you actually provide the product, so it's more affordable for some consumers. But I think it's critically important for consumers to understand exactly what does that affordability look like, and what does that actually mean should I ever need it. Is there inflation protection? And why is that important? In part because of the fact that if you're not going to need the product for 30 years, if there's not inflation protection, then the benefit itself erodes over time. What are the issues in terms of lapse rates? And exactly what could you potentially do with getting some of the benefits back? So I think there's questions that consumers should think about as they explore private long-term care insurance, which, again, is a viable option for those who can actually afford it. We know that the industry itself paid roughly about $9 billion in claims over the course of the last 2 years. We know that more and more people are claiming benefits, and they're generally satisfied with the product.
Part of the solution is deciding where to live in the right community for you. One concept you've written about is the village.
Yes.
Not to be confused with the villages down in Florida, but the village concept. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the villages concept it started off in Beacon Hill in Boston, and it really is grassroots. It's neighbors helping neighbors. And I love to tell this story. We had an opportunity to hear from some of the founders, and they wanted to age in their community. And they were told, well, you can't. And they said, well, why can't we? So they formed a village, and it's really neighbors helping neighbors, organized as a nonprofit, designed to help them age with options. The village, and there's roughly several hundred in the United States, and it does a couple of things. One is that it actually allows you to engage with others. And allows you to age in your home and community for as long as possible. These are nonprofits for the most part. They're voluntarily driven, reflects the needs and preferences of the communities in which they are in. Some of them are staffed with executive directors. The one in Beacon Hill has a full-time executive director and some staff. And they do a range of things. They help with some of the managing of home modifications, or providing you with a list of providers that you can contact to help with things in your home. They do a lot of social engagement activities. In the case of Beacon Hill, one of the things that they did was the fact that they worked very closely with the healthcare system, and one of their members was getting discharged from the hospital, and their family lives in another state, and the hospital discharge planner called the executive director and said, Miss Jones is leaving and is about to get discharged from the hospital, and she's going to need some help. And by the time Miss Jones actually got home from the hospital, the executive director and some of the volunteers had already stacked her fridge up with food, and then they would constantly check up on her. So it is really grassroots. It's really that sense of community.
There's one not too far from here, Mount Vernon at home. And if I understand it correctly, it's basically a bunch of people. It's like, we're all in this together.
That's exactly
so
right.
Let's help each other out.
That's exactly
Someone
right.
can't drive, I can drive, so I'm going to help you with the shopping, or I'm going to help you get to church.
That's exactly right.
It just connects all the people together.
That's exactly right. It is a sense of community, and it is really looking out for one another, because, again, the desire to age with options and to age in your home and community is so strong, and it's something that we've been tracking for many, many years, at least about 20 years, I think, and it has consistently stayed extremely high, and people are looking for options, alternatives that are not as expensive as moving into assisted living, or as expensive as getting nursing home care, or moving into a retirement care community, and the villages is playing that meaningful role.
So one thing that I was reading about you, and in an interview with Black Enterprise magazine, you'd said, quote, "Aging, in my opinion, is a social justice issue. People, especially people of color, are easily marginalized, devalued, and discriminated just because of their age." And to me, that kind of nails it on the head, but you don't really hear aging talked about as a social justice issue. So I'd love to get more of your thoughts on that.
Well, absolutely. This is something I'm extremely passionate about. And in fact, this is something AARP, through our work around Disrupt Aging, is really under our CEO, Joanne Jenkins, is leading a charge on, is this whole idea that how people are aging is drastically different from how they've aged in the past. And the whole notion is the fact that we put labels on people, and particularly as they age. And those labels constrain. And I think it's extremely important to kind of think about what are the value statements we're making when we make some of these, or society makes some of these type of statements. I look at my family, and they couldn't wait to get us out the house. They are actively engaged in their community. They're going on trips with their friends. They're living their best life as best as they can actually do it. However, you don't see those type of images often. You see, and so the question becomes exactly, what are the stereotypes we actually see in terms of older adults? And why is it that for all the isms that we have said as a society that that is not acceptable. However, when it comes to ageism, there's a little bit more leniency. And as an organization, we're trying to disrupt aging and the fact that we want to help people age and live their best life the way that they want to live their best life, realizing that how they want to age is drastically different from what society might think it is. And I think that it is so easy, and sometimes these comments or these statements or these jokes are said in jest, but I think that there's potential some truth behind even some of those jokes. And we have a great opportunity to really kind of think about how do we design, innovate, and create bold solutions so people can age with options, age with dignity, independence, and a great sense of purpose. Older adults are not a liability. They want to be great contributors. They want to provide value. There's a great sense of wisdom and excitement. And to the extent to which we can work collectively to kind of think about and embrace what it means to be your age. Many years ago, we had a major conference in Miami. It was one of our AARP conferences. And our CEO challenged everyone to walk around with a button saying how old you are. And it was so powerful to see people walking around with these buttons saying, I am 77 years old, and I am proud of it. And just think about that. Your life history has shaped who you are as a person. So rather than shy away from it, embrace it. And I think that what we're trying to do is stimulate these conversations, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector. What types of products are we creating? And we're excited to see when companies say, we're going to stop using the term anti-aging. That's a good thing, in part because of the fact that it embraces the full you and everything that has happened that's gotten you to that point. So that is what Disrupt Aging is about, and particularly in that clip, what I was referring to is the fact that it's oftentimes it's so easy for society to marginalize people just because of their age, and we have some wonderful clips that on our AARP website around Disrupt Aging, where we actually highlight, and we did this with millennials, and we said to the millennials exactly, when you think of an older person, what comes to mind? And you can see these millennials do different gestures, whether it's the flip-up phone slowly coming out or walking extremely slow. Yeah. And then we said, okay, then we paired the millennials with some older adults. And we had the millennials teach the older adults something, and then we had the older adults teach the millennials something. And it's an amazing clip to watch because one of the older adults tried to teach one of the millennials how to do a yoga stand. And he just struggled. He just struggled. Or a millennial tried to teach one of the older adults how to do one of these hip dances. Mm-hmm. And he showed her once, and then she was able to pick it up and did it better than he could. Mm-hmm. So then we said, how old do you think is old? How old is old? And then their response was drastically different once they actually had an opportunity to engage with the person. And that is what Disrupt Aging is about. That is what we're trying to do, that it is a social justice issue, is the fact that you don't see the individual, you see the person's age. But if you were to actually talk to the individual, connect with the individual, that sense of connection, your perception of what it means to get older will be drastically different. And so we want to challenge that.
That's great. So let's conclude with a few actionable things that people can do. Mm-hmm. Someone's listening to this. They are concerned about their own long-term care planning. What are one or two things that they should do immediately? First of all, visit us at our AARP website. We have a caregiver resource website that has a range of information and tools and tips and checklists that will actually give you options in terms of exactly exploring what is the cost of care in my community. We have a long-term care calculator where you can actually look at your state. You can actually compare how much the cost of long-term care is by the different types of options that are available. And you can at least have that as a plan. The other thing is the fact that there's a range of resources for you to think about putting everything together in terms of your finances, and whether it's your 401k, your retirement, your savings, all in one place. Then we have a list of resources in terms of exactly here's who you need to contact and call to get a sense as to what options are available in your local community. And hopefully by having that checklist, that plan, you're, again, one better
off in terms of having those options and those choices. The other thing we would encourage is to have these conversations with your family. Family caregivers are unrecognized and need to be recognized for the hard work that they do each and every day. The vast majority of them are working, and we at AARP say either you are a family caregiver, you were a caregiver, or you're likely to become a caregiver, in part because of the fact that the family caregivers are the ones that are providing the bulk of the long-term care in this country. So we want to encourage them to kind of think about what are your needs as a family caregiver, and what type of resources and support can be provided to help support you as you care for someone else. And part of that is having that conversation. What are your preferences as you get older? What are your preferences in terms of where you would like to receive services should you need them? And then having that conversation so your family can honor those preferences and be in a position where in the event there is a crisis, they know exactly what to do and to honor your preferences.